I am the good shepherd, says the Lord. I know my own, and my own know me. Now, there's two ways to hear this passage. One is a nice pastoral metaphor, shepherds, sheep, things working well. And the other is to hear the royal undertones that are being embedded in the metaphor. Because a shepherd was a common metaphor or word for a king. And so there's more going on than what we might take as just a pastoral narrative. And so today what I want to do is to raise up into our awareness the regal dimensions of this pastoral illustration and point out how it actually helps make sense of Jesus' trial and the charges laid against him. So, in our reading, there are two sections that start with, I am the good shepherd. And in both sections, Jesus emphasizes that he lays down his life for the sheep. In the first section, he contrasts himself with the hired hands. They don't risk their lives, and he speculates, fairly or unfairly, that they don't do that because they don't love the sheep. They don't care for them. In the second section, Jesus emphasizes how close he is to his sheep. He and they are like the Father and him. Couldn't be any closer. And then he declares that he has other sheep, and he must gather them as well. And the goal, he says, of his shepherd tenure is that there may be one flock and one shepherd. Now, I don't know if this works for shepherds as a functional policy, but it sounds like a very good shepherd. Frankly, one who cares, one who is close and attentive, that makes good sense, and one who gathers his flock and protects him. These sound perfectly good, like perfectly good characteristics of a shepherd. Now, I want to suggest to you that there's 5 elements in Jesus' metaphor that have political undertones that would have been heard by chief priests in Jesus' time. Maybe not the people, but I suspect so as well. Well, the first is, of course, the hired hands. And this is obviously a roast of the chief priests. They work for Rome, is the criticism here. They're not autonomous. And the accusation is that they don't love their people. And what they have done is just to save their own skins or to hoard power for themselves. Second, the closeness of the sheep. Now, the political undertone of that is that the rank and file are with me, Jesus is saying. They support me. They're mine. And he has a very broad base of support. And better than that, or worse than that, depends on your perspective. The third point, he has other sheep. Jesus has other supporters. His army is growing. They're in the wings. They're traveling. It's an ominous thought looked at politically. Now, who is it? It doesn't specify. Jesus has talked about the Samaritans, so it could be them, or traditionally what we've understood is not the political metaphor. We've understood this to be the Gentiles will be included into the flock. Anyways, the fourth point, that there's going to be one flock. Now, the political undertones of this is simply Jesus' nationalism. There's one family, one flock, and to borrow a phrase, one nation under God. And 5, there'll be one shepherd. This is just a very thinly veiled declaration that Jesus is the king. I am the good shepherd. I am the good king, is what people will be hearing, that they did hear in the time. And I think this is supported by his claims then in the passage of having the power to lay down his life and nobody takes it from him, and he had the power to take up his life. These are regal, absolutely kingly powers, a little better than king even. But it's a little more than just a good shepherd, isn't it? Now, I think this way of looking at the undertones helps support how and why Jesus was tried for being the king of the Jews. And therefore, if he was the king of the Jews, he could be perceived as a threat to a Roman emperor. So, in my mind, for myself, the Good Friday readings were still ringing. And let me read that. Are you the king of the Jews? Do you ask this on your own, or did others tell you about me? I'm not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and chief priests have handed you over to me. My kingdom is not of this world. Oh, so you are a king. Then Pilate brought Jesus out. Here is your king. And the chief priests said, away with him. We have no king but Caesar. The word Caesar was the source word for the German word Kaiser, for the Persian word Kaiser, for the Russian word Tsar. This has been a common political theme in the Western, and for the Western world, let's say. But for ancient Romans, the title king was not good enough. It was diminutive almost. They liked emperor. That was the highest form. That was the one who had the most power, the most honor, most prestige. Kings were typically hereditary, you see, and that's just not how politics worked in Rome. Emperors typically became an emperor. They received their power because they were acceptable to the army and to the bureaucracy, and sometimes the Senate. Now, I think in our minds, for most people, the most popular use of the title Caesar was for the dictator Gaius Julius Caesar, who reigned from 49 to 44 BC. Now, he was the great-grandson of his namesake Sextus Julius Caesar, who was a famous magistrate about, I think it was 250 or so BC. But Gaius Julius Caesar, you recall, gives us that wonderful, he doesn't give it, but a situation from his life gives us that wonderful phrase, which is sometimes said, I don't know if you've heard it or know it, beware the Ides of March, which is March 15th. That was the day that Caesar was assassinated, just a mere 5 years into his dictatorship, and his friends took part. Beware the Ides of March. Caesar was also the honorific title given to Emperor Augustus, who reigned from 27 BC to 14 AD, and this is to whom the chief priests are pledging their allegiance. When they say we have no king but Caesar, it is Caesar, Emperor Augustus. That's the line of the hired hands. We have no king but Caesar. Now, I think in our day, we like to think that we're done with all that jazz, emperors, dictators, kings. We have progressed, we are progressing, we are free. We just need to tweak the edges a little bit of our political system, and the government will do that for us. But I wonder if we're actually clear on the political theory that we have of nation and government, or what's really going on. We used to say that you can't talk about politics or religion, and in some ways we now only talk about politics, but also not really talk sensibly about it. I think we have seen since a year plus that some countries still have imperial designs for the world. So when Russia invaded Ukraine, I think it became clear, many people burst the bubble of progress and idealism and said, oh, what? Somebody's still thinking like that? Yes. You could also look at China. They have grand aspirations for the world, and you could look at all kinds of things that are going on there. Dictators and autocrats are all over. We might be living in a little bit of a delusion thinking that we're past all these things. But even in our own culture, what are our guiding political metaphors? What are the best ways in which we look at a prime minister or president or our party system? Is it us versus them, or are we working together to common cause? I mean, just what do we think is going on? Now, we hear a lot of talk about globalism, environmentalism, sustainability, a new version of environmentalism, the disinformation protections that are going on quietly and behind the scenes, and diversity. We hear that as well. I think that in moderate doses, these issues, these ideas are unequivocally good. But moderation is something that we don't do very well at in our time. There are extreme forms of these things that become complete ideologies. They have completely imperialistic scope and vision. Anyway, so my view is that I think we've forgotten our founding political ideas and metaphors. And we might be running on automatic. We might have this blind faith in progress. We might have been exhausted by all these discussions. I'm not sure. However it has come about. As I prepared for this sermon, I found reading this pastoral political metaphor of Jesus incredibly comforting. It's clearly grounded in a very practical job of a shepherd. And when those properties are, applied across to a political leader, it's very comforting. A leadership that loves its people. Imagine a leader that loves his people, that brings them together and doesn't divide them. Imagine admitting that the flock is diverse. There's many flocks, and that's fine. And that a good leader gathers them together and protects them. I think I found it very comforting. That's all there is. So my last thought for you. Maybe this is something of the hidden strength of Jesus' teaching, his ability to use very straightforward metaphor for much more complex issues. And he doesn't dive into the complex issues and give you a 2-3 hour long form video of all the ins and outs that you don't even want to follow, even if it's all good. He gives you a very handy picture that has good fence posts, and you know what he's saying in the metaphor. And on your own time and your own thinking, you can apply it to the real world. So not only does his teaching transform lives by giving truth in language and proper stories, but it can also provide, I think, sensible political intuitions and metaphors, and therefore inspiration for ourselves. And perhaps he has, in fact, inspired us to our own political system. Definitely, these are words of inspiration in times of chaos and power struggle, just as they were in his day.